And Delhi-NCR continue to reel under severe pollution, ranging between the severe and the hazardous category yet again this Thursday morning. Meanwhile, Delhi and its surrounding regions, which are under a thick blanket of smog with near zero visibility and hazardous air quality, are disrupting daily life. As pollution levels worsen, both the Delhi government and the Supreme Court have stepped in with tighter curbs to address the crisis. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court, while hearing a plea on air pollution, allowed the Delhi government to take action against owners using vehicles below the BS4 emission standard in the National Capital Region, modifying its earlier August 12th order, which permitted action only against BS3 vehicles. A bench led by Chief Justice of India, Surya Kant, clarified that no coercive action should be taken against vehicles that meet the BS4 norms or newer standards, that's the BS6. Now, the debate on end-of-life vehicles is back as the Supreme Court revives the ban which it lifted on August 12th. But do remember, enforcement against and impounding of only BS3 standards and below cars. Meanwhile, BS4 cars are still protected from enforcement. In effect, petrol cars more than 15 years of age and diesel cars more than 10 years of age that don't meet BS4 standards, the minimum BS4 standards, are subject to action. Meanwhile, it's not just the Supreme Court. The Delhi government has rolled out a series of emergency measures to curb emissions. Private offices in the capital have been directed to operate with only 50% staff attendance, with the remaining employees working from home. However, essential services such as healthcare, transport, sanitation and emergency services have been exempt from this 50% rule. In another major step, the government has announced that only BS6 vehicles registered outside Delhi will be allowed to enter the city, with the restriction coming into effect from today, December 18th. In light of this, it's important for you to know your vehicle and what these GRAP 4 rules on cars entail at the moment. For petrol cars, Delhi registrations of cars which are BS6 and BS4 are permitted to ply on Delhi roads until the GRAP 4 measures are in place. Meanwhile, non-Delhi registration, which includes cars from UP and Haryana, only cars which are BS6 are permitted to enter the Delhi roads. Meanwhile, for diesel cars, the standard continues to be fairly strict, only at BS6 vehicles, and no category below BS6 permitted to ply on Delhi roads. Now, which are the cars which are BS6 compliant? Well, it's important for you to check the registration certificate of your car before driving out. Well, BS6 engines were introduced only in 2020, which means if you bought your car in 2020 or after, it is a great likelihood that your car would have a BS6 compliant engine. Meanwhile, BS4 engines were formally introduced only in 2017. But some cars manufactured even before 2017 were BS4 compliant. Cars manufactured before 2020 are likely to be BS4 and below. Some cars manufactured before 2017 may also be BS3, subject to getting impounded and enforcement action likely to be taken on those cars. Meanwhile, the government is also saying if you don't have a valid pollution under check certificate, you're not going to get fuel at any petrol pumps in Delhi. Fuel stations will refill cars only with a valid PUC. Meanwhile, fuel will be denied to non-PUC certified cars. Authorities will use automatic number plate recognition systems and on-ground checks to verify compliance. Now, with air quality showing little sign of improvement, if at all, officials say these measures are aimed at reducing emissions and preventing a further deterioration in Delhi's already severe pollution crisis. First, let's listen in to Delhi's Environment Minister.
दिल्ली के अंदर आज से तय किया गया है 50% वर्क फ्रॉम होम होगा और ये एक बड़ा कदम है जिससे मुझे लगता है कि काफी फर्क आएगा। दूसरा, कल से दिल्ली के अंदर दिल्ली के लोगों से मैं आग्रह करता हूं अपने पोल्यूशन सर्टिफिकेट लें। जिसके पास पीयूसीसी नहीं होगा उनको कल तब तक फ्यूल नहीं मिलेगा जब तक अपना पीयूसीसी नहीं करवा लेते। साथ ही में दिल्ली के अंदर जो ट्रक आते हैं बाहर से, जिसके अंदर बिल्डिंग मटेरियल आ रहा है, जैसे कि बदरपुर और रेता जैसी चीजें आ रही हैं जो कि दिल्ली के अंदर डस्ट का रोल अपनाती हैं, इनको भी कंप्लीट बैन किया गया। अगर कोई ऐसा चीज लाएगा तो उस पर सख्त कार्रवाई की जाएगी। और साथ में भारत स्टेज 6 कि व्हीकल ही दिल्ली नॉन रजिस्टर्ड व्हीकल जो दिल्ली में बाहर से लोग आते हैं, मेरा उनसे भी आग्रह है कि अगर आप दिल्ली आने जा रहे हैं तो दिल्ली में भारत स्टेज 6 कंप्लायंट व्हीकल लेके आए। इससे कम के व्हीकल जो कि दिल्ली में आके पोल्यूशन फैलाएगा उसके ऊपर भी कार्रवाई की जाएगी।
All right, we will bring you numbers, the numbers which are released by CAQM, in some time from now. But India's fight on EVs continues to be an uphill battle. Let's understand all the challenges that commuters are likely to face, drivers and car owners in Delhi-NCR are likely to face with these new guidelines now in place. Sumit Chaturvedi, senior auto journalist, joins us this morning. Sumit, good morning. Pleasure having you back with us here on News9. Just help us understand, first up, the Supreme Court directive. It seems to be pretty much a U-turn of what we had heard in the August 12th order, which pretty much said that end-of-life vehicles, 10 years and older, diesel, 15 years and older in the case of petrol. The Supreme Court had pretty much lifted the ban on those vehicles plying on Delhi roads and said that enforcement action will not be taken. But now the top court of India making pretty much a U-turn and saying that if your car is BS3 compliant and maybe potentially even younger than 15 years or 10 years, it could be impounded.
Well, definitely, it's a big even jolt for people who were hopeful that their old cars will not be given for scrap. So yes, they have now given a Supreme Court has said that BS6 and BS4 vehicles, well, those kind of vehicles which are 10 years and 15 years old and petrol and diesel form, well, they will be only allowed to scrap. But yes, it's a U-turn of sorts. It was to happen because against so much of hue and cry, because pollution is overall a subject which is getting a lot of attention, and courts going against will of the environmentalist would have been taken not in a good way. So coming from there, yes, Supreme Court's this complete order has taken many aback, and that is what has happened. But talking of the overall environment, this was necessitated by also in the sense that it makes a lot of older vehicles go off the road, which are needed also. So polluting vehicles, yes, they will go off the road, but yes, some of the modern vehicles, BS4 and BS6, they will still not be complying with this directive, which is a good news for many of the people as well who hold these modern vehicles.
But what does it mean for people who were looking at deferring their car purchases because the Supreme Court in its August 12th order had said that impoundment is not going to happen, enforcement action will not be taken if the vehicles are at least following the PUC norms. But now with this latest directive, people who were still, and those numbers are pretty huge, we will bring up those numbers on the screen in some time, but those numbers are fairly high. There are about 1 crore odd cars plying in Delhi-NCR, which are more than 10 years to 15 years and still BS3. So what does it mean for people who were looking at deferring their purchases, hoping that their cars will continue to ply, and now they are no longer permitted to ply on Delhi roads?
Well, it's a bad news for people, commuters. Definitely, they have to go and buy. But good news for vehicle manufacturers, because of course their sales will increase because of it. So in a way, yes, I am also one of those consumers who were hoping that this directive should not be there. But now my older vehicle will also come into this directive, so I will have to scrap it within a year. Otherwise, I was thinking I could have really. So I am one of those many consumers who are now going to buy new vehicles because of this. But yes, they have given some kind of overall, we can say that they have given some kind of relief to people if they have modern vehicles, BS4 and BS6 vehicles, but older. And in a way, it is good also, Kartik, from the point of view of environment, because many of these older vehicles had the problem of breaking down in the middle of the road as well. You would have seen many times on flyovers and other places, old vehicles break down, they cause a lot of jam as well. So older vehicles, many of these were falling into commercial vehicles purview. Now these are going off the road, which is good in a way as well. But yes, you're right. Now consumers will have to shell out money and buy more vehicles because this relief has not come to them.
Absolutely, and the numbers are fairly astonishing. In fact, CAQM data tells us, and in fact that's the affidavit that was filed by CAQM in the Supreme Court, that the total vehicles registered in Delhi stand at about 2.88 crore. There are almost 3 crore vehicles registered in Delhi, and 93% of these, that's about 2.67 crore vehicles, happen to be cars and two-wheelers. Now, of this 2.67 crore, BS3 or below comprise as much as 37%. More than one-third of all the cars in Delhi are BS3 or below. That's almost 1 crore cars, 99 lakh cars or so. And these BS3 and below cars emit anything between 2.5 times to 31 times more pollution than BS4 vehicles. So obviously, the numbers suggest that the severe crisis of pollution that we are faced with could potentially be solved if India were to get rid of those BS3 cars, if Delhi-NCR especially were to get rid of these cars. But Sumit, the challenge on electrification of Indian mobility continues to loom large. In fact, if you remember, last financial year, FY25, India registered only 2.6% electric vehicles out of the total cars sold in the country. In FY26, this year alone, in the first half, that number has jumped to about 5%, where India has registered as many as 91,726 electric vehicles. But far, far from the government's target of 30% electrification by 2030. What is holding people back from going ahead and making those EV purchases?
Well, I give an example here, Kartik. Let's see Maruti Suzuki, the biggest car maker in India that still holds over 45% market share, has not brought out EV so far. Well, they have been having this EV coming up with it, but when majority of the biggest player is not having an EV on road, well, it impacts the overall acceptability. Had there been a proper network usage for electric chargers, it would have been a great thing. But on the other hand, the small car makers started this so-called revolution: Tata Motors, Mahindra and Mahindra, MG Motors. So in a way, India is in a way lagging behind in infrastructure because the majority, the major player, the dominant player has not brought out EV on one side. But on the other side, yes, the range anxiety still exists in people. People say EVs will have to be the second car only. First car can not still be an EV because many things cannot be relied upon. Like charger or charging time, it can't be relied upon and charges many places. It doesn't work. I sample this at many charging places. Other people they park their own petrol or diesel cars. I've seen it many places in Delhi. So unless this whole problem is solved of people having this chargers or having these behavior problems, or the major player in the car market coming up with its own EV infrastructure, this is difficult. Just given a small example, Ford yesterday in US, it shelved its plans for having a big EV under its portfolio, taking $9 billion loss. It shows that even globally, somehow the car makers are losing their confidence in EVs. Well, hybrids in India, if we talk about, one side, Toyota, Honda, and Suzuki are pushing for hybrids. On the other hand, Tata, Mahindra, and Western players are looking for EV. So in India, the players are also divided, and that is also causing a lot of trouble for electrification or the revolution as we were earlier expecting.
Absolutely. Sumit, you mentioned Ford's challenges of actually shelving that $9 billion project of electrifying its fleet. Meanwhile, it's not just US. Even if you look at Europe, Europe is likely to now come down on its lofty ambitions of no ICE vehicles flying from 2035. So my question to you really is that, do you think with what is happening globally in the US as well as in Europe, Europe also climbing down from those lofty goals, is India likely to become lax on its target of 30% electrification by 2030? And even if India doesn't, is 30% electrification going to be enough in the context of pollution?
Well, it's a daunting challenge. Definitely, 30% electrification is too much. And in India, we have seen one policy starts and something happens and sometimes it's rolled back as well. Well, not just car makers, it's the people, it's the charger. Like in societies where we live, you and I live, maybe the society owners are not clear what kind of rates will apply to them, what will happen to chargers. So it has to come on a large scale. The network has to come on a large scale. Also, the overall people should know what will happen when, as far as EVs are concerned. And also, we need good EVs. But one thing I would say we have done well is EV, the availability of EVs, their range of electric vehicles available in the market. Tesla is there, Mahindra's vehicles there, Tata's vehicles there. So range is there, but networking, the charging problem is still not solved. So yeah, it is a daunting task. At 30%, it looks quite difficult by 2030. We are just 5 years away from that, and it is still not being done on a large scale. But government, if the push keeps on coming, it is possible.
Sumit, in the interest of pollution, at least, if nothing else, the government should potentially look at relaxing rules of permitting Chinese EV makers to enter the Indian market. Is the affordability problem going to be taken care of?
Yes, that is there, but we have seen politics playing its part over the last few years. First, we were not letting a big EV, like if I give an example, BYD is here from China, but one another big player was not given okay to come, and it was Great Wall Motors. It was not allowed to come into India. So yes, but China controls the majority of electromagnets, majority of charging infrastructure components. So yes, geopolitics was playing its part over the last 5 years. PLI schemes were announced. They were successful to a limited extent. But yes, if they're allowed, however, keeping in mind the tensions between India and China that keeps on emerging every few quarters, well, those have to be kept in mind. But yes, China being a dominant player in EV market can't be ignored.
Absolutely. Well, Sumit Chaturvedi, as always, pleasure having you. And thank you so much for your perspective on this very important development today.